June 6, 1944. 160,000 troops, 2,000 aircraft, and 7,000 ships invade the shores of northwest France. Operation Overlord is in full commence. D-Day has begun. Soldiers storm the shores, watching as bullets from German machine guns hit their fellow soldiers, their friends. Could Europe hold on any longer against the invading Germans? How many more American lives had to be sacrificed before we could stop the Nazis once and for all? Was this our last chance to stop them? The invasions of Normandy were a turning point in history because they decreased the forces of the Nazis and sparked the end of World War II. September 1st, 1939, German forces invade Poland, sparking the beginning of World War II. Because of their pact with Poland, Britain and France declared war on Germany. Germany advanced towards other European countries. The Germans invaded and took over many countries, including Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. The Nazis constructed Fortress Europe and the Atlantic Wall to repel all invading forces. The Allied leaders began to realize the importance of gaining a second front in Europe, so they began planning an attack on northwest France on the beaches of Normandy. They had codenamed the attack Operation Overlord. The US and British started Operation Fortitude with the main goal of convincing Germany there was going to be a large attack on Norway and Pas de Calais, not on Normandy.
But with the deception plan and with telling bold untruths and lies and propaganda, he had convinced in the German mind that they had up to over 90 divisions.
Through Operation Fortitude, the Germans built up forces in all the wrong locations. In England, the training of soldiers to fight in the invasions of Normandy began. The Allies began construction of artillery, vehicles, and a large naval force to use in the invasions against the Germans. Practices of the invasion took place before to simulate what would occur during the landings, so they'd be better prepared for the invasion. The Germans, learning of the possibility of an attack on Normandy, improved their fortifications on the Atlantic Wall. The Atlantic Wall was an arrangement of obstacles set up for an invasion that stretched up and down the French coastline. It consisted of concrete bunkers armed with machine guns, light artillery, and anti-tank weapons. In addition to that, there were mines across the beaches along with metal poles in the water. The Germans' goal was to destroy the landing boats before they could unload onto the beaches. Attacking the Atlantic Wall would be difficult because of the various obstacles set up for the landing boats, the Allies' main transporter of troops. With the deadline for the attack approaching and the weather getting worse, General Eisenhower had to make the decision to postpone the attack to June 6th.
When they were on June the 4th, wondering where they should go, Eisenhower turned to all of his subalterns and said, "What do you think?" But it was the air commanders who said, "Well, we'll have to call off the parachute drop. We can't drop the men in this." And immediately, when they came to that conclusion, then the Americans said, "Well, then we'll have to cancel the landings at Utah Beach." And if you cancel the landings at Utah Beach, Eisenhower said, "No, absolutely not."
The weather of June 6th was better than the previous attack date of the 5th, but it was still tough weather to push through. The high tides of the day could cause problems for incoming boats trying to land specific areas, and they could also leave paratroopers and their supplies off their mark. But the Allies feared if they didn't act now, the Germans would invade and possibly even take over Britain. Allied soldiers loaded into landing boats and started their sail across the English Channel towards Normandy. The first attacks on Normandy were by air, 5 hours before the coastal attacks. 13,000 paratroopers dropped down behind enemy lines to protect the western part of the invasion and cut off supplies being given to the Germans. The weather and darkness in the night scattered the soldiers, and many of the supplies sent down to them were lost. Even though the soldiers were scattered, the disorganization of the attack left the German commanders confused, which led to their defeat. The attacks with the paratroopers were a success in securing the safety of the soldiers invading on Utah Beach. The aircraft were followed by a large naval force assigned to take out German batteries on the beaches. The ships launched thousands of tons of artillery onto the beaches, partially clearing the way for the incoming soldiers. After the large bombardment, the landing craft were approaching the invasion. Many of the landing craft were stuffed full of about 30 soldiers each, many of whom were getting seasick from the waves. The soldiers on the boats were divided into divisions with specific objectives to carry out. Most soldiers were equipped with a Browning bar or M1 Garand rifle. Others were outfitted with explosives to blow down bunkers or supplies to treat injured soldiers. The American, British, and Canadian landing craft made its way up to the beaches codenamed Omaha, Utah, Juneau, Gold, and Sword. Omaha Beach was the most fortified beach of them all, and with bombardments sent too far inland, many of its defenses remained intact. The first wave of landing boats that were not destroyed were under heavy fire from machine guns set up in German bunkers. As the ramps of the landing craft were lowered, sounds of bullets flying by were heard throughout many of the boats. Many of the soldiers disembarking from their landing craft found that they were about 50 yards out from the actual shore. They were forced to wade through the water under attack from artillery, mortars, and heavy machine gun fire. They slowly made it through the knee and even neck-high water, weakened from seasickness. Many soldiers watched as their comrades were shot down and killed from the German fire descending upon them.
A shell fell and two of the men were hit close to the top of the head. They lost the top of their skull.
The initial landings had high casualties, with many of the survivors taking cover on the beaches. The second wave of landing craft came in, bringing in reinforcements and extra supplies. The ineffectiveness of the first attack caused high casualty rates for the second wave, but it spread out the German fire. Small groups of men started to slowly make their way up to the beach, pushing through the German defense. The soldiers' attack threatened to fail because of the heavy German defense. The attacks eventually led them up to the bluffs, where they were pushed forward with the encouragement from their officers. Allied soldiers eventually took control of the beaches, dismissing any German counterattacks from happening. While Omaha Beach was difficult to take, the Allies saw little opposition at the other beaches. The defenses at Juneau, Sword, Gold, and Utah Beach were spread out and weak towards the might of the invasion. Hitler attempted a counterattack with panzers at Juneau and Sword Beach, but they were fought off by British anti-tank guns. When the day was done, there was a total of about 10,000 casualties. About 6,000 of those were American, most coming from Omaha Beach. The attacks on Omaha Beach on D-Day were mostly successful because of the relentlessness of the American troops invading on the beaches. With many of the pre-attack bombardments failed, there was very little hope and high casualty rates for the troops on Omaha. If it was not for the great push of American forces through Omaha Beach, it may have been lost, causing a huge defeat for the Allies. With the success of the attacks on Normandy, the Allies were able to gain a foothold in France. Utilizing this, they were able to eventually drive the German army back out of France. With little German opposition left in France, Paris was liberated by a local resistance. The Allies were able to push back the Germans further and further back into Europe. The Soviet Union then landed attacks on Germany that crippled their army and their hold on many European countries. The Allies pushed forward into Italy and Germany and defeated the military of the Third Reich. Adolf Hitler commits suicide on April 30, 1945. The Germans then surrendered on May 7, 1945. The Nazis, becoming crippled from the loss of their leader, eventually crumbled into the ashes of what was once a great and powerful nation. If the invasions of Normandy would have failed that day, the war could have been much longer and worse, and maybe thousands more would be dead.
The Allies, of course, would have been totally mentally defeated in the sense that they would have lost a lot of men, like the Omaha sector had they been thrown back, and it would have taken them a long time to regroup and reorganize another landing.
Without the attacks on D-Day, the Allies may have had no other chances to invade on the Germans successfully. The invasions of Normandy were a major turning point in the war and history. The attacks on Normandy did exactly what the Allies needed. They decreased German power, allowing the Allies to push them farther back into Europe. Attacking Normandy turned the tide of the war in the Allies' favor and sparked the surrender of the Axis powers.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory.